Hi, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we discuss issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let me review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of the segment, I put in my 2 cents and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. This is a very special show because it's the last show of the year, so we're going to have a couple very special segments, including a look back at 2023 and a look forward to the new year and at what's likely to happen in Newton. We might even have a few predictions, which harken back to the old days of the show when we used to have predictions at the end of every show until that totally stressed out some of our panelists. So we stopped doing that regularly, but we are going to do that again tonight on a voluntary basis. Heads up to the panelists. We'll like to hear a prediction before the end of the show. So we always, as I think our audience knows, have great panels on the show. But tonight, I'm really, really excited because we have an absolutely fabulous panel. Just your socks will be removed very shortly by this information. So without further ado, let me introduce everyone. Emily Norton. Emily, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be back.
This is going to be your last show, at least during this stint as a city councilor.
That's right.
You've congratulations on your graduation, or liberation.
Retirement is the term that they use.
Yeah, well, it really does free up a lot of evenings, I can tell you after.
Yes.
You did 10 years on the council? Yeah. 18 was like, I guess I had a longer term. I had done more things wrong first. I had to serve more time, I guess. So Emily, of course, you are the Ward 2 ward councilor representing Newtonville. And in addition, your day job is you're the head of the Charles River Watershed Association.
Yes.
And I'm very excited to be reading about some of the things you're doing to get rid of some of those dams on the Charles recently.
Dams.
Yeah, so I hear, if you want to talk about that for a sec, like even though that's a Newton enough thing.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, Newton is entirely within the Charles River watershed, and the watershed runs from Hopkinton to Boston. The river runs north, 35 cities and towns, and while the Charles is much cleaner than it was than when we were children, actually, we're all from Newton.
Yeah.
Well, not you. Not cleaner than when you were a child.
About the same, maybe?
Yep,
But the work is not done. So that's the theme, really, is that there's a lot more work to do to have a fully swimmable, fishable, clean, and healthy Charles River.
So what's wrong with dams? That's the question.
So dams block fish passage. They cause thermal pollution, which means they heat up the water beyond what is healthy for the natural, for the fish and the animals and the bugs that rely on the river. They are unsafe as we face more larger, more intense rainstorms from climate change. The vast majority of them, over 100 on the Charles and its tributaries, do not serve any purpose any longer, including the ones in Newton.
And
foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. and of course they can cause back injuries. Because then I have to carry my canoe.
Right,
from
exactly.
I'm like, my back. Anyway, so,
Yes, that's an excellent point. I'll have to add that one. And it could cause Ken back injuries.
Or other I'm not the only one who can presumably. Right. So thank you for coming back on the show, Emily. And by the way, you're not off the hook just because you're off the council. You're a permanent invitee to this table.
Great. I'll have more time to join.
Great. Jeremy, first-time panelist.
I'm excited.
Welcome.
Yep.
Jeremy Freidberg is the president of the Newton Highlands Area Council and software engineer?
That's correct.
And anything else in your background you want to share? Did you grow up in Newton?
I grew up in Newton. I lived here my whole life. I'm also on the traffic council.
Many hats.
Yeah, many hats. And yeah, it's great to be here. So.
Well, welcome. Yeah. And you've been an organizer with an effort, but we'll spoiler alert. Yeah. It might have something to do with when it's dark out and where the cars are located.
Something like that,
But we will get to that in a minute. And Alison Levy, welcome back, Alison.
Thanks very much, Ken.
Thanks for coming. Alison, you are the former Ward 1 ward councilor and current Ward 1 at-large councilor, correct?
Correct.
And so you've also, along with Emily, been serving about a decade?
Yes, I got elected in a special election in November 2013.
November. So it was a special, but November.
I took my seat early.
Oh, so
because
it was a
an
regular
open seat.
election, but you got to get sworn in early then?
No, it was
No?
a special election because I was filling in a vacant seat.
Vacant seat.
Yeah.
Even though it was a regular November. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a special November election.
It wasn't a regular election.
It was extra
We
special.
had a, yeah.
Well, you had a special welcome to the city council, and
Yes.
was it the board of aldermen then? Were you
Yes.
ever an alderman? Yes, that's what I.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Emily was the person that
Right.
got kicked that off, and we didn't
So-
want to be called alderman
Yeah,
anymore.
well, I was 21 and I was called an alderman. You know what it literally means? It's old man.
Yes.
So I was an old man
Elder.
at 21.
Yes.
Yeah, alder. It's old,
Yeah.
right? So
You
it
should have
was.
been
It
called
was.
a younger man.
It was the board of old men.
Yes, that's what it was for many.
Oh, well, for a long time, that's all it was on. Except it was like a bunch of old men and Wendell Bachman for a long time, because when he was young. But then he became an old man. By then there were other people on. But anyway, professionally,
So I'm a program manager with Heading Home, which is a nonprofit agency that works on ending homelessness.
excellent.
So I help. I've been very happy this week. I've got 3 people who are going to be in their own apartments before Christmas.
That's great, and I certainly hope that you achieve your goal soon, because homelessness stinks for the homeless and for everybody else too.
Yeah.
Nobody's in favor of homelessness.
Unfortunately, I think
right?
I'll have a job for a while.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that you'd rather, right?
Yeah, make yourself redundant.
Exactly. Anyway, well, thank you again for
Yep.
coming back on the panel. And not one, but 2 presidents tonight. President of the City Council, Susan Albright. Susan, it's great to have you back on the show. Or wait, have you ever been on?
I have never
You're
been
also
on
a
the
first.
show.
So, and we served together for what, like 8 years, maybe?
Something like
when were
that.
you first elected?
2003.
2003. So I was on till 2009.
Yep. So,
So
5
6
years.
years.
6
something.
years.
Yeah, it was like 3 terms together.
Yeah.
And you've been on since, so that's
10 terms.
10 terms. Wait, 20?
It's finishing my 10th
Oh,
term.
yeah, right, because of course it's now 23.
20.
How did that happen
I know.
already?
I know.
Time flies, right? It's
When
crazy.
you're having fun.
Yeah, and sometimes when you're not. Although it was really slow during the pandemic. I feel like this year was faster somehow.
It was a
But-
fast year.
And you were at Tufts, what I recall, or you're
Yes, I did technology for Tufts Medical School, and
you're always off to India or something.
I was off to India and Africa, but I did bring some of that technology to Newton. I brought us kicking and screaming into the 21st century. We're going to have a
Excellent.
new docket tracking system, and
Wow.
our ordinances will not be PDFs for much longer. They will be in Municode, an online
Nice.
system.
We tried to do that years ago, and
Well, it
the
was
city
time.
clerk kind of balked at it. So.
Carol Moore is our great city clerk.
Okay, all right, great. You've got more technology interest now.
Yep, absolutely.
The first topic, I think, was something that will be of interest to everyone in Newton, no matter what they think about this, because we know what side they're on, or if they even have a side yet, because most people in Newton are aware that we occasionally have these 4-wheeled vehicles on our streets, and sometimes they're moving with people behind the wheel, and sometimes they're not. But there has been a lot of strong views over the last few decades about the parking in the situation in the city. And in particular, one of the things that the council, that we have in Newton that a lot of communities don't, is we have a restriction that prohibits, a prohibition during certain months of the year on parking overnight on street. During, I guess what's called a winter parking ban. It doesn't exactly correspond to the winter season, but this is, it's been shortened, the fees have been increased, there seems to be a kind of a tug of war on it over the years. But when I was on the council, there was an effort to repeal it back in the olden days. And that failed, and it's still in place, but it got shortened at that time. Then I left the council, and the fee got multiplied 5-fold, as I recall, so as soon as I left. And now there's another push to maybe scale it back or eliminate it entirely. And so I'm going to actually let one of our, I usually don't have the freshman member of the panel lead off, but since Jeremy, you are the head of a citizens, it's fair to say you're the head of it, you're the
I'm the head,
organizer
yes.
of a citizens group that has been working to repeal the overnight parking ban in Newton. Why don't you tell us why you're doing that and what you're, how do you get excited about this issue, and what do you want to, what's wrong with banning overnight parking in Newton?
Sure, happy to. So yes, I am the head of a ballot question committee. We've been since this summer, we've been getting signatures to put a question on the ballot through the initiative petition process. And this is coming in the context where, as you said, over the years, the council did work on shortening the dates a little bit. And we also had some stuff happen during 2020 and 2021 where the ban was temporarily suspended. And coming out of that, I did hear from a lot of people that they'd like to, the suspension went well, and they'd like to see something like that go forward permanently. And those people tend to be people like myself who are younger and are still in Newton and live multi-generationally, people with less means, and so on. So that's kind of how I got started.
So just to put it, what's wrong with the overnight parking ban in a nutshell? Why do you want to get rid of it?
Well, for a lot of people, they'd have either a tight driveway or no driveway, and they'd like to have the flexibility to park on the street somewhat near their house. I don't expect it to necessarily be right in front of one's house, but somewhere that's convenient and reasonable and make their lives a little easier.
Okay. And thank you. Let's see what others around the table. We know you're for repealing
Yes.
it. Allison, how do you feel about this topic?
I'm not in favor of repealing the overnight winter parking ban. It's really not about snow removal anymore. Parking has value like everything else. In the council, when we do a special permit now, we always disconnect the cost of the parking from the cost of the unit. That way, the housing is actually a little bit less expensive because it costs a lot of money to build parking, as much as $150,000 a space for underground parking. So I feel like if with parking having value, there's also other things I want to add. Like Emily will like this, we put in restrictions on parking once a month in Nonantum. It's a pilot so that we can do street cleaning. Street cleaning is really important. And it's very difficult to do it with cars parked up everywhere. I get a lot of complaints from people on my ward about the problems with the parking, all the cars on the street, making it unsafe sometimes to cross. And what I know that I can see the writing on the wall in terms of there's going to be a referendum and it's going to pass. But before we do that, I would like to put in place a permit parking system, at least in the more congested areas, like particularly Nonantum and Newton Corner and other areas, so people have a permit parking. I still want to regulate parking. I don't like the idea of free car storage with no limit, and that's what happens. You'll have people leave their cars for sometimes weeks at a time. It makes it difficult for other people to park in front of their homes. It makes it difficult to clean the streets. And the other thing, it's the only way that we can sort of mediate the amount of cars that come into the city a little bit, because you have to think about where you're going to park your car. And free parking is like a fertility drug for cars. It just brings them in. So for me, it's really about a little bit of control that we have about, because we're all about walkable villages. We want to put more density in some of our villages. And it's really not, it's not the number of units, it's the number of parking spaces that people object to. So let's not give away the store in my book, okay?
A fertility drug for cars. That's an image that's going to be in my mind for a while now, thinking about how that all works out. Anyway, thanks, Allison.
Yeah.
Susan, for it or against it, repealing the overnight parking ban?
I am for repealing the overnight parking ban, but not without restrictions, and I think that's where we agree. Mm-hmm. People who have, basically on the north side of the city, who have no place to park. These houses were built many, 100 years ago, let's say. They have no driveway, they have no garage, they have no place to park, and they feel it's very elitist that the people in Newton won't give up on this parking ban. And I think we can solve the problem if we put our minds to it. I've over the years, the first one that you were on the council for, then the board, I docketed that one, and I docketed this one that we discussed this term, but that went nowhere. But the administration is not interested in a permit parking program, which really would be a good solution, because then people who have no place to park their car could buy a permit. They could park on the street. But the police are not interested. They have like 2 cars, very small shift of police overnight. And they don't want to implement a parking permit program. So that's a discussion we need to have.
Thank you, Susan. Emily, for it or against it?
I am for maintaining the winter overnight parking ban. And originally the purpose was for street sweeping of snow, snow clearing. That's less of an issue now with climate change. We have a lot less snow. So I am sympathetic to people who are saying it's great weather, it's 50 degrees in the middle of December, there's no snow on the ground, why can't I park on the street? So, and I am sympathetic to the concern of people who do have limited or no off-street parking. But I'm worried about the unintended consequences. And as we are approving a lot more development, which we're probably going to talk about in this show, and we're not requiring a lot of parking in many cases, or even any parking in some cases, then I am concerned that there's going to be a lot more cars on our streets. And the last time we talked about this, I want to say a couple, 3 years ago, we were getting emails from people who said, anecdotally, yes, the reason I don't get a third car for my teenage son or whatever is I don't have the space for it. So even that 3 to 4 month period, knowing that you need to have a place to put your car, is a disincentive for some people. And probably the biggest concern that I hear or have heard as a counselor over the last 10 years is related to speeding and safety, road safety. And so to me, it doesn't make sense that we would incentivize or remove a disincentive to bringing more cars into the city. And the permit program has a cost. We have to pay staff to set it up. We have to pay staff to enforce it. And we heard from the police at a committee meeting just last week that they're not going to be able to do it. So I think we have, maybe it's inelegant and imperfect, but we have a very clean way now. If you're one of our officers on the beat between 2 and 6 a.m. and you see a car on the street, it gets a ticket. You don't have to look to see if, well, it's longer than an hour.
Well, how do you know if it's been there for longer than an hour?
Well, I don't know how much else they have going on in the middle of it, so they're probably, checking. I don't know. We could ask them. You could have them come back. But
it's not a parking ban, then. You can't park more than an hour in that.
There's no having to check the little sticker on it, because there was something we talked about. What if we only allowed people with handicap stickers? But then, and they're talking about, well, whether if it's icy and covered with snow, and then you're taking time to go try and see the sticker. Yeah. So what we have now is a very clean way to enforce. It does keep the streets clean during snowstorms, and it is a disincentive.
Can I?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually pick two people who disagree the most and let them talk, and then the other panel. So I think, Jeremy, you're the chief proponent of this, so I could flip a coin between Emily and Alison. Well, why don't you talk to Alison? Try to persuade Alison of your view. And just talk directly to each other. I'm just going to sit back and.
I'm glad I could agree with Emily on this, because I think she was very eloquent about why it's important to have it. But go ahead, Jeremy. I'm all ears.
Sure. I mean, so one thing that as definitely on everyone's mind is the cost of car ownership, and certainly cars are not cheap. I think you've mentioned that. I've mentioned that as well.
Yep.
So that seems to already be a deterrent.
Houses aren't cheap either. Do you think, is it an equity issue if someone has a bigger house than you? Or is this, the whole thing about equity doesn't ring true to me, because for me, parking has a value like anything else, like the car itself, like the house, like clothing.
Oh, I certainly agree.
So
that
why
that
do we want to have free
has
parking?
value and how we can use public property.
We want to just use our streets for car storage all year long?
I think that's one use that may be noble, help some folks out. In most neighborhoods, it probably would not be totally overwhelming.
I wouldn't do it unless we had a permit system in place, and the cost of the permit covers the cost of enforcing it. So if we need to hire officers
So my question is, besides just limiting the number of cars, which I'll accept that premise for now, is there any other purpose to the permit? Is it that some people, is there a certain level of deserving this where you can earn the permit, or I'm just trying to understand this?
Oh, anyone.
The idea a little.
It's just like the same system that Cambridge and Boston has. Street parking is limited. It's not. It's a resource. You could look at it that way.
Oh, it's certainly finite. I agree.
So a permit parking system, I just think if we didn't have some kind of control, that we would just see cars parked everywhere.
Alison, let me just ask, your idea for a permit parking system, would that be a year-round system or just for those winter months? In other words, would you need a permit to park overnight on the street in the summer, which you can now do in summer and spring and fall?
I think it probably would go that way. To be honest with you, I hadn't thought about it completely through, but I do believe that the ballot question, is it 2025?
2025 is.
So I think it's likely it will pass, so I think we should take the time to plan for that now. So it probably would be, should be year-round for permit parking, but I'm open to having that discussion.
Can I just,
Sure.
you know, the thing that's missing from this conversation is people. We have single mothers with kids who have no place to park their car. They have to drop their kids off at the house and then go find the place far away where they have to park their car, and then they have to walk back, hoping that nothing's happening to those kids. We have elderly couples who have no place to park their car, so he drops her off. She goes inside, he has to go and then walk back in the snow and the ice. I mean, you forget that there are people attached to these cars that have no place to park. The city provides no place for them to put their cars in municipal lots, and they won't give.
We do provide spaces in
We provide
municipal
some
lots. Not everyone lives
spaces.
near one.
Exactly.
I'm sympathetic to those instances. I understand it can be a hardship for some people, but there's a lot of things that are hardships too. And we should make sure that those folks do have some available parking in lots, perhaps school lots. In Nonantum, we have a number of large lots, which we could probably use as a resource for people to park at. But again, parking has a value, has a price. Everybody wants free parking, even me. I love free parking if you can get it, but the externalized costs hit everybody else.
Yeah, but
But you get $500 when you land on the free parking. That's a big controversy.
My question about that, though, is knowing these were our rules.
Yes.
You know, I do sometimes wonder, I feel like sometimes landlords don't tell people about the overnight parking ban, and so people are caught flat-footed, so to speak. But when it comes to developments, when we are approving developments without parking, we are listening to the developers who say, oh, this is going to be marketed to people who don't have cars. And so I don't know why we would have a different story for people when it comes to the winter overnight
So I
parking.
think you can separate the issue of, for example, you could require that there be no parking in city centers, in village centers, and that could take care of the problem of developers who refuse to provide parking. That would be one solution that I could see happening. So there's ways to figure this thing out and still be kind to the people who have no place to park their cars.
But that's more likely to be where the issue is. I mean, that was something
But
that
the
people,
issues are all
one of our
over the
colleagues
place.
said to me, and I'm not going to name the person, they were on the south side, we all have long driveways, so we don't really care. So it is in the areas that are more congested that people care about this issue. One more point I wanted to make is that I did reach out to city staff to see if there could be another way that we could limit new cars. Could we limit in the granting of not parking permits, what's it called? The excise tax by tracking it that way. And the answer was no, because someone can register their car at their mother-in-law's or wherever, some other place, and still have it in Newton. So if there were some other creative way that we could limit the number of cars, then I would be more open to it, but I haven't heard that. And the other thing with the municipal lot, at this point, even people who get a permit to park in the municipal lot have to clear their car out during snowstorms. So
It's not that way in every city. I can tell you that, because
But
Councilor
if you
Kelly
go
and I have looked
to
it up.
Cambridge and Boston and Somerville, their streets are full of cars and they can't be cleared from snowstorms. So it's not that snow is over.
You know, the timing, we could let people stay in those, if we have a big storm, they could stay there maybe 24 hours and the city focus on clearing the streets. And once they clear the streets, people could then move their cars, shovel them out and move them, and then they could do the parking lots. They're a timing issue, I think.
So I have a question
But
for
then
the panel.
then they can't clear the lot.
After they have to move their cars onto the street, onto the cleared
There would be
street.
time where
Yeah,
there's
it
snow
probably
on
wouldn't
cars,
work
yeah.
perfect, but
So let me ask a question to the members of the panel who would like to see a permit system, or who are making this argument that that cars are a bad thing and we should limit the number of cars.
I'm not going to say cars are a bad thing.
Well, okay, that
we all drove here.
okay.
You did. Cars are a useful
Hey,
thing.
speak for yourself. No, I did.
I know you did.
I know, I'm just kidding. But
cars have a high cost,
okay.
right?
That there's an externality to cars that we want to limit, and we want to in some way limit the number of cars in the city. If we were to accept that as a premise, would not the logical extension of that be to say, let's have a year-round overnight parking ban? Why? What is special about the winter? I mean, historically it was about snow clearing, but now we have, reverse 911. We've got email alerts and text alerts. It's certainly possible to tell somebody, hey, it's going to snow. Snow emergency.
It's
Get your
not
car
about
off
the
the
It's not
street.
about the
It's
snow.
not about the
Brookline
snow.
has a year-round parking.
Right. So that's my question. would you rather have a year-round parking?
Some people.
Let me ask Alison this. Would you, if you had your druthers, if you were czar for a day or whatever, Would you make it a year-round parking ban, overnight parking ban?
I probably wouldn't make it a year-round parking ban. And I just think it would, first of all, I'd be very, very unpopular.
Well, it doesn't matter. You're the czar. They can't do anything. As a matter of policy, do you think that would be better in a perfect world?
I think in a matter of policy, no. I think we should go to a permit system. That would be at this point, that would be my preference.
Okay. Emily, I want to just ask you that same question. Would you support the seasonal ban? Why not make it year-round for all
Because
those
it
reasons
is
you
an
already...
inconvenience for people, so let's inconvenience people as little as possible in order to achieve the policy benefit that I think that it does achieve.
Okay.
So,
Jeremy.
so one thing which that reminds me of, obviously I'm against having a year-round parking ban, but as far as
Yeah, I wasn't
what
gonna even
as
ask
far
you
as,
that
as
one,
far as what
Jeremy.
Emily brought up, one thing that it reminds me of is recently the council did discuss again another shortening of the overnight parking ban. Essentially, Susan, you and Andrea had a proposal to essentially, well, the dates were up in the air, but it's a sort of a proposal for basically 1 month of amnesty on a temporary basis and
Right.
sort of see where that goes, where that takes us, and see and sort of test out this
Wait, what
theory.
does 1 month of amnesty mean?
One month where right now it's December 1st, March 31st. Chop off a month somewhere.
Like
Give
15 days on each end?
Or
Whittle away
Or play
a
a month on one end and then keep the other end
Okay.
the same. And so that proposal was, help out the people who we all seem to agree do have a problem with the parking ban. Some of the other solutions seem more long-term, like the permit. So chop off a month, make people's lives a little easier. And the council did reject that. And so I to me that was surprising because the 2 months still seems plenty annoying. It's hard to have your overnight guests. It's all the things still.
Well, Emily, you just said you wanted to minimize time.
I wouldn't have a problem with changing the amount of time as long as it was significant enough to
Is it
keep
too late to docket it again?
to keep well.
We'll chop off the month at the other end. Next term.
I think it got conflated with the whole issue at the time. But I think another reason to keep it long enough to be a disincentive for people to bring more cars, but short enough to not be more of a hassle, is that some people do pay to store their vehicles in people's driveways or garages and so forth. And so by keeping it somewhat short and not going all year, you are saving people money in that way. Again, this is not perfect, but I think it's a complicated problem. And we do have, as I said, an inelegant solution that is more or less working right now.
What do other people think about Jeremy's suggestion, shortening the amount of time?
Well, I docketed, so
I
I'm
voted no.
100% in favor.
You
We voted no on it.
voted no on it.
Yeah.
You
But
said
I am,
there was a split vote.
well,
on
I
it.
meant a lot of people, it didn't pass the council.
Do you-
so-
I think it was 22 to 2.
Oh, so,
Yeah, it was pretty
who
overwhelming.
was the other yes vote?
And
You and
Councilor
Andrea, right?
Kelly and I
Oh,
voted
okay. Well, there you go. So, okay, let me just throw out one other thing that's been discussed over the years. See what people think about this, which is we're 13 villages in Newton. Every village has different needs. What about allowing area councils or neighborhoods to pilot a program where in that neighborhood there would be overnight parking allowed during the winter?
The very first time we docketed something, we asked for a pilot in one of the precincts in Ward 2 and 2 precincts in Ward 3, and the council turned us down. So
Well, again, I'm not that you have no influence over the council, obviously. You don't have to. Well, you're the president. You couldn't get 3 votes for your item. But seriously, I'm just talking now about what would be a good policy, not what was
a pilot would be a great idea.
in a given neighborhood.
We have a pilot most of the year.
Well, no, the idea would be a pilot to have a neighborhood.
A year-round pilot.
To
essentially.
see if that caused, I don't know, lots of teenagers to speed, as has been suggested.
I
might
feel like
happen.
once you went down that path, which, as Allison is saying, is probably going to happen in 2025, then the issues that I'm worried about will either happen or they won't. And if they do, then that's going to be what we deal with, and it'll just be our streets will look more like Cambridge.
Well,
and Somerville.
presumably it's not irreversible. It's a two-way door. You
It's
could
hard to
change
take that away from people. Imagine
That's
doing.
taking the genie out of the bottle, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I think that would be a one-way journey.
By
Well-
the way, the number of cars registered in Newton has gone down for 2 years in a row, at post-COVID.
Yeah, I did see, like, that it's not like we've
More
had a
people
big
are working
spike.
from home, maybe? Is
Yeah,
that?
that's probably a good
But
reason.
another point is that, we're doing a lot of work on traffic calming, we're redesigning roads, we have this project on Washington Street that's looking great, putting in more bike lanes. I think it's really important to think about multimodal ways to get around, right? And not just, we're pretty car-centric. We've built our cities and towns around cars for the last 100 years. And guess what we got? A lot of cars. So we're going in a kind of a different direction. And I just think free totally free parking is the antithesis of that. And it's just one tool we have in our toolbox. As I said, I understand that it's most likely we will remove the parking ban by referendum.
So let's go to your point there that
Okay.
you raised earlier, and I want to just, what would people think of a permit system that had a presumably modest cost for having a parking permit to park overnight, so that people who needed it could buy it? Maybe you even have a scholarship fund for people who couldn't afford it. Is that? I'm going to just go around the table and see what
I'm
people
just
think about it.
sympathetic that we don't have enough staff to do all the things that we want to be doing already, and it would be time-consuming and resource-intense to have a permit system. And I'm skeptical that we would raise enough money to pay for itself. But I won't be there to decide.
So,
You'll still get a vote in the at the ballot box,
Yes.
like the rest of us.
yeah. So I mean, as far as the permit system, I'm certainly mindful of the administrative burden as well. And I mean, what I'd like to understand further is it necessary? Certainly, is a citywide permit system necessary? It seems like lots of people will still have their driveways. They might only need this overnight permit or overnight allowance so they can accommodate their guests once in a while, things like that. So it's not going to be, at least in my mind, this drastic change where everyone's bringing in all these cars. I mean, I can tell you, in my house we have room for, well, if you park on the grass, 4 cars. We only have 2. So that I don't see this sort of big change happening all at once where it'd be totally out of control. So that's where I'm coming from as
That's
far
why
as.
you're supporting it.
Well, he's making his case. So,
You don't live in
Alison-
Nonantum.
Yeah, or
Allison, what would
North
so a permit system? How would you see that working? You did suggest it.
Well, I see it work well in other communities, and what we would have to do is raise the fee enough to cover the cost of the administration for it. Because we would have to probably hire at least some part-time or full-time parking enforcement officers.
So they go out in the middle of the night between 2
guess.
and 6 a.m. There'd be the nocturnal.
that would only be the police.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth docking
down.
the item and having a discussion
We're
about
down
it.
almost a dozen police right now.
okay. So, but Allison, you think that the cost of the program could be accommodated by fees? What do you think, Susan? Do you agree with that, or?
I think that the administrative part, just of getting the permit, can be done online. We don't have to have people coming into buildings and paying for things. We can do it online. Takes care of the administrative cost
And then
of it
they
that
mail
way.
it, right? Then they can mail it to them, or
Get
they
They
pick
can
it up.
print it out
It'll
yourself?
download it and print.
Okay.
Well, I think you'd have to prove, I mean,
Yeah,
I
you
don't
have to
think
submit certain things,
that
and
usually humans review, is my understanding. Just saying.
I think
Again, we review it, we have a discussion about it, we see what works.
I think a permit
We're
program
not-
could help alleviate the fears of some people that says think we're going to be overrun with cars.
Well, we are all year round in Nonantum and Newton
Right.
Corner.
That's what I think
We
is
are
missing.
all year round. It's wall to wall cars.
There's a resident who moved from near the Ward School to Lowell Ave near Elmwood Park,
Yep.
if you know where that is. And he was like, Emily, it's like a different city. Like it really, different parts of the city really feel different. And so I think that's part of the problem also is in your neighborhood, people are like, why are they doing this to me? This makes no sense. And
Well,
a lot of the
that's
people
my
in North-
question.
Well, I mean, I'll push back on
People
my
in
neighborhood.
North-
I mean,
North
we
Newton
have,
are like,
we do have
why
multifamily
would they do this?
in my neighborhood, and there's my neighbor's tenants. They do have problems, so it's not just.
So-
it's not all perfect where I am.
This is the reason for my question, though. Why wouldn't you not let different neighborhoods come up with their own solutions? But
Well,
I
can I say
think
on Nonantum quickly. I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to their case. I just had coffee with Terry Sorrow the other day, and she showed me all kinds of. We did a whole walking tour and everything. And what I'm still trying to wrap my head around is, they do have problems, and the overnight parking
Yeah.
ban isn't even addressing them. It seems like they might need something different. And that's really where I'm coming from. I'm not sure what.
All right.
I'm not
That's where
sure.
the
I'm not sure
permit
what would
system
really
We have
change.
2 other
if we repeal the parking
very
ban.
exciting topics.
So-
I knew,
We're just getting warmed up.
I knew that people would really be excited about talking parking. It is like the 3rd sexiest topic
It
in the
is,
city,
it
right?
is.
It's
I
up
mean,
there.
zoning
right up
is right
there
at the
with
top.
sewers.
Yeah, I know. Oh, sewers and zoning are the only 2 that are sexier, right? But maybe setting the tax rate. People love that one too, right? But
Water sewer.
yeah, right, there you go, water sewer fees. But seriously, I think I'm going to wrap this topic up. It does sound like there is at least common ground on the level of realism that people feel like this is the direction the community wants to go, even if people aren't happy about it. I'm just going to put my 2 cents in on this because I served for 18 years on the then Board of Aldermen, now City Council, and over the course of that 18 years, I think I heard about 36 different justifications for why we needed this winter overnight parking ban. Every time someone discussed repealing it, at first it was like, well, we couldn't clear the snow. Well, why can't we send an alert out? We have to declare a snow emergency. Then I remember one year the police said, well, people can hide behind, criminals can hide behind cars on the street. That was that year's reason du jour. But I got what I thought of as a little bit of an elitist undercurrent to this conversation over the course of years, which was people didn't want other folks parking in front of their houses.
That is true.
That seemed to me to be the real driving force behind keeping it. And obviously there is something to be said for just sort of inertia too. But I've been. And now the latest explanation, the latest defense of it is of keeping the overnight parking ban in the winter is that it's with all this zoning changes, it's the only check there will be on massive overdevelopment. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me. If you want to limit the amount of development, you do that on the develop what you allow.
No, you're conflating.
But,
That's not right.
It's not development, it's the number of cars.
Well, just to be clear, if you want to limit the number of cars, then limit the number of cars.
But I just said,
Limit
how do
the
you
number
do
of parking
that?
spaces.
Yeah,
Ken.
well, no,
Put
I
a
mean,
cost on it.
Yeah, how
well,
do you,
then
how
do
you
it.
limit the number of cars?
You do it year round. It's ridiculous, I think,
No, but
to
it
say
serves the same purpose as over 4 months.
it doesn't really because people
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 tell
get
me
the
that it
tickets
does.
because people get the tickets and they pay them for the winter.
Yep.
No, they're not, when it was $5, that was true. But when it's
Yeah.
$25, people don't want to pay $25 a night to park in front of their
people
house.
do not get ticketed every night. They move their cars around. I know people who do this who don't have enough on street, and they'll pay the three $25 tickets they get over the course of winter. If you really want to limit the number of cars, then ban it year-round.
I don't
Anyway,
buy that.
Okay. Well, we're going to move on to the next topic.
No comment.
Because it's your show, Ken.
Well, yeah. No, because we got 20 minutes left.
Guests are revolting.
Yes. Well, I think you're not revolting at all. I think you're very nice.
Yes.
A little annoying, but we all are, right?
Feisty.
Feisty, that's the word.
Scrappy.
I don't agree with those people who say you're revolting, though. See what I did there?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I heard it each time, actually. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. But let's look back on this year now. Obviously, I think everyone agrees the big news of the year in the city is that the state deadline to comply with the MBTA Communities Act, which is coming up in a few days, was complied with in the city of Newton with a almost unanimous vote of the city council in what has been a very divided city on this topic. And this was a very highly charged issue in the recent election. I think it was probably the only issue that most people were concerned about in the recent election.
Besides the parking ban.
Yeah, I'm sure that was what everyone was charged on. What am I thinking?
Add hopefully complied, because we haven't heard back from the state yet, and there might be some
Well,
issues with
okay,
that.
well, we'll
That
get
did
to
come
that
up.
in a second.
Okay.
But my question, I'm just going to go around the table once. Are you happy with what the city council did? Just a quick, and then I'll see if people disagree, and we can try. You can do, 25 seconds. Tell me why you're happy or not happy or not happy.
Yeah, very happy. Zoning and development are very divisive issues. They have been the entire time I've been on the city council, and there's some people who want more, well. Let's just accept for the sake of argument that there is a regional housing supply issue and that Newton has to do its part. That's why the state passed this law. The state did the math on what Newton was required to do. That is more or less what we've done and a little bit more. There was a proposal to do way more than that. Our voters did not want us to do that. We scaled it back. So I feel good about Newton doing its part. And if the state had not passed that law, I do not think we would have passed this. So I think in this case, democracy worked the way it's supposed to.
Jeremy, good, bad, indifferent. What do you think about the?
I'm pretty happy about what I saw in the council chambers this past month. I think definitely I saw councilors who listened to the voters and compromised. And I think that, Susan, you're on ZAP, and so are you, Allison. So you
Yes.
both worked very hard on all the standards that went into the text for the village center zoning. And I guess the only thing on my mind is I wish that there had been some more information. There's lots of talk sort of at the last minute about, is VC2 mixed use financially feasible? That was sort of passed around as maybe this, and I would have loved to have seen that information available sooner. It's still not really clear, but to help the council make an informed decision, that would have been nice. So that's really what's on my mind. But overall, I was very happy to see what happened.
Well, there was a whole thing of amendments that came up,
Yeah.
right?
We're gonna keep this focused. Do you like it or did you not like
I
it?
voted no, Ken. I was one of two that voted no.
We have both of you had a vote where you were one of two. So tell me, why did you vote no on
So
it?
I was on the Zoning and Planning Committee. I have been on for 10 years, and the last 3 years
My
was...
condolences, by the way.
I know, really. Only thing worse is land use. So we worked really hard on it. We crafted a really thoughtful VCOD. And we're talking about zoning for the next 100 years. Zoning where we're addressing two important crises. The climate issue, right? Climate goals. And also a housing crisis. We have a huge housing crisis. People can't afford to live in Newton. We're actually losing students from the schools because young families can't afford the $1.6 million for the median-priced single-family home in Newton. And we don't allow multifamily by right
So you
anywhere in
voted
the city.
against it, why?
Because it was eviscerated. I felt like we did put all this work into it, and we did the bare minimum, and I was disappointed.
You wanted to do more. Okay, just wanted to get that
Yes.
on the, okay. It wasn't immediately cleared. I mean, I knew that, but
I wanted
enough
to
their
do
audience would have
more, but
get that.
it's still, we're talking about 3.5 and 4.5 stories in certain villages. We already had removed 6 villages before
Okay.
that, so we had compromised already.
You think it should have been the version that was prior?
Of course.
Okay.
No question.
Okay. Susan, how did you feel about the result?
I am very happy that we got something passed that resembled in large part what the Zoning and Planning Committee sent to the full council. Yeah, we compromised by giving up 6 of the 7 of the villages, and unfortunately those villages won't get a chance to grow the way the other villages will, so we'll see how they feel about that. But by and large, we did a good job getting a compromise that most people voted for. I think Jeremy raised an excellent point. I wish that we had known. And the state will probably come back to us and say that because we lowered some of the village buildings by a story, that we've made it economically infeasible because you can't do both inclusionary zoning and commercial on the first floor, which we all know is a loser financially for developers. So if they come back to us, we'll have another bite at the apple. We'll fix it. We'll fix it.
All right. Well, it sounds like there's not going to be common ground on this one, but let me just we'll go through a bunch of topics, lightning round style. So I'll put my 2 cents in on this one. First of all, I love to see the city council come together and be responsive to the voters. So I very much agree with both Emily and Susan. By the way, congratulations, Susan, as president of the council on, I think, masterfully getting the council to a compromise
Yes, Susan
on that.
did a tremendous amount of work.
And I know that doesn't happen in a vacuum. You see in legislative bodies where there should be a compromise and there isn't. So I'm very happy from a process standpoint and from a local democracy standpoint that the voters were heard and a compromise was reached. I will say I worry about the consequences of this because I absolutely agree with Allison that people can't afford $1.6 million, $1.7 million, $2 million houses. But what I see in the marketplace is speculation. And I worry that this ordinance is going to cause speculators to buy up properties and actually drive up costs and make Newton less affordable. And with these properties, we're going to see lots of new $2 million units. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. That's one thing I worry about. And I also, looking at the rules, it looks to me like it's possible to do by dividing things up an end run around inclusionary zoning, which only applies if there's 7 units. And so what I would have liked to have seen is all MBTA Communities Act developments have to have an affordable component. And if they're smaller, the way we used to do it when I was on the council before the ordinance was changed is you had to make a financial contribution if you didn't have actual on-site units. The way it was is whatever your zoning bonus was above what you could do by right, you had to have...
We still do that.
Yeah, we still do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had to have 25%. No, you don't now. If it's fewer than 7 units, there is not a mandatory...
Right, that's right.
You have nothing you have
Right.
to do now.
Because
Let me explain the way it worked. If when I was on the council, if it was multifamily and you could build 2 units by right, and you wanted to build 10 units, you would say 10 minus 2 is 8. You needed 2 affordable units, and you rounded it up. So if you wanted to build 9, you'd still need 2 affordable units. The way it works now is if you're building 6 units, you have 0 affordable units. If you had built 6 units then, you would have needed 1. And if you my view is that VCOD can be used now to make Newton less affordable. That's my number one concern, and I think it can be fixed, by the way, by the new council. I think there can be work to close that loophole. The second concern I have is that even though in some places first-story commercial is allowed in the village centers, I think it may be more in the developer's economic interest not to include it. So I would rather have seen it required.
It is required.
In some of the, not on all the sites. Yes, in one of the areas, in the red area it's required, but not in the green area.
No, it's
the black lines.
the black
Black
lines.
lines.
Those
Within
are
the black
priority
lines, right.
streets.
Yeah, so there are existing businesses in the city where that first-story commercial is not required, and I'm worried we're going to lose some of those businesses. And again, it's not catastrophic effect, but I think that there could be some tweaking of this that will make more affordable housing and also protect the vibrancy of our village centers better. I hope that the council is open to both of those things. Want to go to another topic, though, so we can keep going through other things that were happening in the city this year. Tree ordinance just passed. Anybody have any? Let's go around the table this way. There was an amendment to the tree ordinance after many years. Susan, was it a good amendment?
It's coming up on second call on Monday night.
It
has not
passed.
yet passed. It left committee, and I think it's a good idea to. I think it's a good ordinance.
Okay. What do you like about it, real quick?
It protects more trees from being cut down, and it
The caliper inches were the
we
smaller trees?
reduced down to 6 inches. I know that Emily didn't get everything that she wanted out of it.
Oh, I should have let Emily go
Yet.
first on this.
Yet, we haven't voted. I might have some amendments to propose.
Okay, well, I didn't realize, I thought that, oh boy,
Yeah,
I'm out of
no.
the loop. I thought it had already been
I'm
voted.
going to have to do some more thinking about the tree ordinance this weekend, but I will say that I'm very happy for it. I'm very grateful for the hard work that Emily and Julia and others had done. I think it's really important. We need to protect trees. It's critical to meet climate goals and to have good quality neighborhoods. My one concern is why I don't think we should be including some of the invasive species like Norway maples, tree of heaven, because there are people that want to remove those and put in native trees. So I don't think we should penalize people for replacement of those trees that are not native with.
Aren't they allowed to? They just have to replace them on an inch-per-inch caliper basis, right?
Yeah, I don't think they should get fined for removing them. That's what I'm saying.
If they're replacing them, they wouldn't get fined, would they?
If they're cutting down a tree, yeah, they get fined.
I think she's looking for an exemption on Norway.
Well, what I'm saying is if you
Yes.
cut down the tree under the ordinance, at least the way we had it before, as long as you replace them, you wouldn't
Yes,
be fined.
yes,
So you had to replace them on an inch-per-inch caliper
Well,
basis.
no, now you can do whatever you want in your own property.
Well, no,
unless
saying
you're a
one
developer.
through, yes, right. But what I mean is, even where the ordinance applied, you wouldn't get fined if you, okay, I understand your point, though, I think.
And I'm
Is
a
you think they
little-
shouldn't have to replace them, is what you're saying. They should just be able to cut them down.
Right. I
Okay,
do
got
think
it.
that.
Jeremy?
Well, believe it or not, I do know about other things besides parking. So I've been following the tree ordinance, but not quite as closely.
We believe it. You're on the parking thing and the Newton Highlands Village. You're like on all kinds of stuff.
So I mean, certainly with the context of the old ordinance,
traffic
the
thing,
old
I'm
ordinance was
sorry.
showing its age and had lots of loopholes that were being exploited. So I understand the need to update it. I mean, again, for my own take on things, I do kind of worry about the whole sort of micromanagement of people's private property to that extent. And I'd like to look at more sort of why are these trees being taken out? Because there is, of course, a public benefit to them, but it's possible. I haven't looked at the text quite as close as I would have liked to, but perhaps it goes too far. That's sort of where I'm at right now.
Emily?
I'm happy to hear
So
more.
if you accept,
You're the lead sponsor. You and Julia
Julia
Maliki
Maliki.
are the lead sponsors.
if you accept that trees provide an essential public service, then the logic is, why would you let people cut them down on their own property sort of cavalierly the way we do now? If you don't think that they provide an essential public service, then it's very illogical for us to try to control people's public property, as Jeremy said.
Private property.
Yeah, private property. So that's really what it comes down to. If you buy that trees cool the air, clean the air, store storm water, provide habitat for birds and wildlife, sequester carbon, and the bigger the tree, the more mature the tree, the more benefits it provides. If you believe that, well, then of course we wouldn't let people just clear cut their property without any sort of consequences. So that's what we're trying to get to, is what would the world look like if we actually treated trees as green infrastructure, as essential green infrastructure? So we're not saying you can't cut a tree down, but there would be more of a cost, an environmental mitigation cost, which we have not.
So Emily, you're
Agreed
one of the lead sponsors of this. What's it going to make better in the city? What does it do that we aren't doing
It
now?
would make it would put barriers to removing trees on private property.
So
right now, we have a lot of protections
was-
for street trees, for public
So
trees.
it's 1 and 2 family homes right now
Well,
are exempt.
no, right now it's not. What the
It's-
city council, what passed out of committee is, I think it's only 3 properties or more. It's only, I want to say,
Wait a second. So what the current ordinance is
it's only developers.
well, it's not only developers. It's owner. You have to be owner occupied. It has to be owner occupied 1
1 to 4,
1
I
through
think.
4 under the existing ordinance that we passed like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So what you're going to, how are you improving
Well,
that?
what
is
we
I'm
wanted to
asking.
do, what we wanted to do was that anyone would have to get a permit to remove a tree.
Regardless of whether it's owner occupied, regardless of whether it was 1 through 4
If
family.
it's 6 inches, if it's a 6-inch tree
Okay,
or more.
and what's the current draft that came out of
And the
committee?
current draft, I want to say, is 40 inches more. I should remember this. I don't serve on the committee, so I'm not as good. And Julia's the detail-oriented one.
So does it
Good thing I'm retiring.
does it continue
ordinance.
does it continue
We're actually going
the
to,
owner
not to ruin the surprise, but we are going to try to amend it so that it is back to the 6
okay.
inches.
So but does it remove the exemption for owner occupied 1 through 4 families?
It changes it. It doesn't remove it. It just changes it.
To what?
So you're still 1 and 2 families are still exempt, but if they
Only
if you-
owner occupied. though, right?
owner if you take down a tree and within 2 years you build on where that tree was, it will be as if you had to pay in or replace.
Which
So
is a little messy. One of the reasons I don't support, wish we hadn't.
You mean to
done that.
track it and everything? Is that what you mean? Or to keep
Well,
Within
track
2
of
years,
yeah,
you
someone's
have to
going to
pay
keep
in
track
Yeah.
of whether, did you really intend? Did you know beforehand that you were going to do this?
We used to have a really good tree guy in the city, Mark Welch. who
We
was
do.
great.
Still there.
I'm kidding. I know he's still there.
So what I believe the committee did agree on is a butter notification, because sometimes just getting a notification.
Oh, they did. They added
allows-
that back in. Okay, that's
Allows a neighbor to have a conversation with their neighbor.
Well, then they can appeal because the appeal was the key provision
Well,
that we
no,
included in the
that's
first one.
not in there now.
They took out the appeal provision?
Yeah.
That makes it worse than it was before. It should be voted down. Anyway, all right, well, I'll put my 2 cents on it as one of the authors of the original one. I mean, the lead sponsors were Amy Sangello and Mike Lipoff. I was chair of programs and services and actually wrote a lot of the ordinance. There were compromises, as everyone around this table knows. You make laws and sausages, and it's not pretty sometimes, right? But there were essentially 3 things that we left out of the ordinance that we wanted to include. One was we had that exemption for the 1 through 4 family owner occupied. That we call that the Coletti exemption, because Paul Coletti, who was on the committee, felt very strongly. He said, "I've had this tree on my lot for all these years, and I've been raking up the leaves and everything. And if I want to cut it down, darn it, I can cut it." I'm like, "Paul, do you want to cut it down?" He's like, "No, but if I wanted to, I should be able to do it."
That's still a strong sentiment.
Okay, so that was one of the things we wanted. We thought that there was an appeal process, but we got in, but we didn't think the appeal was good enough because there wasn't enough notification. So the trees were like already cut down before there was a chance to appeal. So that was one of the others. Anyway, we only got 5 minutes left. I won't continue my list. I commend the council for working on this. I hope that these loopholes can all be gotten rid of and we can preserve all of the public good of the trees in the city. Finally, on the past year, I just want to open it up. What's the best thing that happened in Newton this year? Emily, why don't you go first on this one?
No, I don't want to go first.
Okay.
Let's have Susan go first. I don't want to go
I
first.
know,
either.
Susan went first. Best thing that happened in this year, Allison.
Oh, it was a very productive year. There were a lot of good things. I'm going to say, since I chair public facilities, building electrification, being part of the 10 communities, I think was really big.
Building electrification.
Was that this year?
Yeah.
I thought that was last year.
Okay.
Well, we passed it.
All right.
Sorry.
Susan, you got something?
I thought
I
you weren't
think-
detail-oriented.
That one
I think all of the projects, the construction projects, I mean, we're upgrading the pool, the senior center,
Yep.
the countryside school, the Lincoln Elliott School, the Franklin School. I think that Newton is being improved in wonderful ways.
Ooh, I got it.
Okay, what do you got?
Hiring Anna Nolan, Dr. Anna Nolan, as our superintendent.
Ooh, that is a
which
good
the
one.
superintendent, which the city council had nothing to do with.
But that's still a very
She
good.
is
She's
a
been
rock
terrific,
star.
right? Yeah. Jeremy.
Well, I'll give some credit to the NewGov system. I think, obviously 2023 was not the first year of the system, but this year I've seen a lot more permit types and record types added. And as someone who loves data and open access, it's really been great to see. There's still more work to do, but that's really been a highlight for me personally, just getting in that system and seeing what's up in the city. So.
I'm going to go with community engagement. I think more people in Newton are, I've always thought that people in Newton were more concerned about what was going on nationally and internationally and wouldn't pay any, and maybe at the state level a little bit, but paid virtually no attention to what was going on in the city. I felt talking to people this year about what's happening in the community.
Rezoning their city got their attention.
Well,
but now we know the secret.
Now we'll see if they stay involved. But I think people on both sides of that issue were very engaged, and I think that makes for a healthy democracy. Now let's talk about the new year. What if you could change any one thing or accomplish any one thing for the city in the new year? Give me something.
I got one.
Oh, you got one.
I'm going to go with the Globe's editorial and I'm docketing this to try and move our municipal elections to the even years instead of the odd years. So we're together with the state and federal.
Okay.
I want more turnout.
Okay.
So next year, I would like to have a citywide plan for addressing gas leaks and for finally sort of getting off gas. I want a plan before I'm not going to support any more grants of location
Okay.
for methane gas until that
Okay.
happens. Just FYI.
All right. I'll never take that clip out of context where you're saying about getting off gas. Okay. All right.
Remind me of the question quickly.
What would you like to see happen in the new year?
Restaurants are open later in Newton.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that's a good one.
Emily.
Spoken like a young person.
Hey, I want that too.
Yeah, so
I want that too, darn it.
one of my requests for my now soon-to-be former colleagues is that we look at notification of flood risk. Right now, and it was literally just on NPR Marketplace on my way over here, that Massachusetts is one of the states, and it's majority states, that do not have a flood risk disclosure requirement. And I believe that's something that the city could do, but with more intense rainstorms coming, more homeowners are going to be, and renters are going to be experiencing flooding, and it's
Okay,
not required now to disclose
Okay.
that to a buyer.
All right, in a second, I'm going to ask everybody for a quick prediction for the new year. But before I do that, I'll give my thing that I want to have happen, which is I want public transportation to be improved because we're so reliant upon it. We're talking about this MBTA Communities Act. Meanwhile, people aren't even taking the T who used to take the T. They're now driving because...
I'm on my e-bike, Ken.
Yeah,
I'll speak for
well, a
everybody,
lot
okay?
of, not everyone has the physical capacity to do that, and also there's ice and road hazards and whatnot times of year. But the point is, public transit is worth the investment, and we've been shortchanging it in Massachusetts for generations
Yes.
now. And I think we need to really take seriously and invest, because those people who drive benefit too. When you get people out of their cars and into the public transit, there's less traffic. And you know, that I hope that is a real focus for the city council and for the state as well, and we work with our legislators on that. Okay, quick predictions, and then we're going to end the show.
Philip Eng is going to come to Newton, and he's going to announce that we're going to get
Yay.
3 double-platformed commuter rail stops.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if we saw some attempts to create a 5th area council here in Newton.
Okay.
Bold.
My prediction for next year? Oh. I'm not really sure. I can't give a prediction right now. There's too many things in my mind.
Okay. All right. Susan?
Well, I was thinking of Emily's prediction, but I'm going to say even further that we're going to get the federal and the state money to get those 3 stations done.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
That'd be great.
Okay.
You heard it here, and our federal and state partners are listening to this and watching right now,
right.
I'm sure.
I'm going to make a prediction that we are going to use Community Preservation Act funds and maybe a combination of private and other funds to build a fabulous new park in Newton. There'll be a big new parcel of land that's acquired, maybe some affordable housing in it, maybe some public trails, maybe some playing fields. And it may have to be done by eminent domain, but it'll happen in this next year, and the mayor will lead the way on it.
All right.
All right. So if any of those things happen, we'll talk about it around this table when we have this fabulous panel back. I hope you all come back. Emily, thank you so much. Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Allison,
Thank you, Ken.
Susan, it's been a real pleasure. And thank you to our wonderful crew, our director, Will, John, Maureen, everyone who's helping out tonight, and everyone here at New TV. And thank you at home for watching. And please join us again the second Thursday of January when we try to find just an eensy, teensy, weensy bit more common ground.